from Church Media Squad. We've been doing these weekly live design hours for you this month as part of our sponsorship of the amazing folks at Church Communications this month. We're excited today to have Ashley and Matthew with us to design some graphics for us live. I live out in Salt Lake City, Utah area, and I'm the founder of Church Media Squad. Our goal at what we do is to design graphics for your church similar to what you're going to see today. We become a graphic design department for your church with unlimited custom graphics. But for today, we got 2 graphics we're going to design live and then provide those free for you later today. I'm also going to include last week's graphics because we got kind of backed up with last week's design load. So we're going to combine last week's free graphics with this week's free graphics and have a bunch of downloads for you guys by tomorrow. So I'll let Ashley and Matthew introduce themselves and then we'll get started designing. Ashley, let's meet you first.
Awesome. So my name is Ashley Fox. I have been with Church Media Squad for almost 2 months, so it's still new, but I've been in church media working for church and communications for about 5 years.
Cool. And where are you at, Ashley?
Oh, and I'm in Southern California.
Awesome. Great. All right. How about Matthew? Let's meet Matthew.
What's up, guys? I'm Matthew, like he said. I've been with Church Media Squad for a little over a year. I came in right when COVID started, so I've seen both sides, which has been pretty interesting. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio, moved from Chicago, Illinois about 6 years ago.
Sweet. Awesome. Well, today, guys, we got 2 different sermon series like graphics that we're going to be designing for you today. Ashley, we're going to start looking at your screen first. Ashley's going to be designing a graphic called Such is Life for a sermon series related to relationships. And then Matthew's going to be designing a graphic on Forward Together. So let's get started. Ashley, show us how you start a graphic from scratch.
Sure. So got a blank artboard here. First thing I like to do is just get a background color because those little gray white squares are disorienting. So I'm going to just throw in, I think what I want to go with today is kind of a tan background color. So I'm going to get started with that. And then I just like to get a title going just to play around with some fonts and see where I want to take it.
Awesome. Do you always start with the text first, Ashley?
I think most of the time, yeah. I usually jump in with font and shape where I want that to go, and then let the images kind of wrap it.
I used to not do that, and then Matthew, who's on our call today, he shared his whole process on social media graphics, starting with text first and then adding the background and design later, and that has completely changed my workflow. I think it actually starts out better as a designer when you start with the text first, because if it's not going to work in black and white, it's not going to work when you add all the cool stuff later.
Yes.
Yeah, and I usually start in black and neutral tones too before I start adding any color to it.
Hey Whit, I see your comment. Yes, that is Grogu over my shoulder here. We've got the Mandalorian next to him. It's a little blurred out with this camera, but definitely a big fan of the Mandalorian show. So, all right, so I'm going to ask a question, you guys, unrelated to graphics while we're watching Ashley play with fonts here. Favorite sit down and veg TV show? Go.
Oh, man.
The Office, easy.
The Office, absolutely. Office is an easy one.
I don't watch TV shows. I'm like that guy.
Man.
So I don't have one for you guys. But it's funny. Everyone that like I come into contact with, their first go-to is The Office. So there must be something about it, the dry humor, whatever goes on in there. But all the memes and everything, I've never seen it.
So I guess, Matthew, that what that means is that those of you watching, we have annual squad retreats. They've been on pause because of COVID since last year, but next year we're finally getting back to meeting in person once a year as a squad. But it sounds like, Matthew, Squad Retreat 2022 is going to be just a binge watch of all The Office for your sake.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. You guys go do everything. I'll just sit and watch.
Oh, goodness.
It's needed.
All right, so we have a question from Jenny Randall watching us. She wanted to ask you guys, where do you go to find fonts? Let's start with Ashley, since you're the one playing with fonts right now, and then we'll hear from Matthew.
Yeah. Well, I actually find that Adobe Typekit has quite a lot of fonts. So if you're subscribed to Adobe account, with having like CC, Illustrator, Photoshop. They've got a lot of great fonts that they offer. But then also Creative Market is a fun one. They have free goods that pop up periodically, and every now and then there's some really good font finds. I usually like to just keep an eye on fonts throughout my life, my work day, and they usually have a purpose later. Like I'll find a good one and just store it and know that eventually that's going to be a good one to hop in and use.
How about you, Matthew? Where do you go? I feel like you're the font king, finding new cool stuff for us at the squad. So where do you usually see those new fonts?
It's funny though, because when I came in, I was learning from all of you guys, like Josh and Kyra, and they were like, they're the kings and queens of that. So I learned a lot from them. But yeah, the Adobe obviously has awesome fonts. I use them a lot. But there's one that's like not really well known called Pixel Surplus. And they sell fonts, but they have a whole section of free fonts. Behance has a whole section of free fonts. I go to, there's also this, it's called Awards with like 3 W's in it. But they like do awards for like graphics and advertisements. But they have a whole free fonts collection. And then Creative Market, if I'm looking to buy stuff, Pixel Surplus has awesome bundles. You can get like 50 fonts for like $20 on those bundles, and it takes a lot of my money most months. But I go there a lot, and yeah, it's just like, you know, from the squad, seeing stuff that they put out in the design phase channel and just messaging them like the cliche, what font is this? And you know, you kind of learn from there too.
Yeah, that's one of the great resources is our design. We talked about it last week in the design hour, but we have this internal Slack channel where we post all of our favorite designs that we make throughout the week. And it's one of those best ways that we get to learn from other designers. Oh, what font was that? You think professional designers probably wouldn't ask that question, but we ask that question just as much as anybody else. What font is that? Because it's a cool thing to try to mess with. Learn from each other's design styles, all that. Well, Matthew, you gave me quite the work there to try to find all those websites really quick that you were mentioning on fonts. But I found them all. They're all in the comment section. If you guys are watching, come back and look at them later on. Definitely one of the things, if you're on Creative Market, I think I said this last week, but they have weekly free graphic resource downloads that you get on Mondays via email if you're on their email list. It's super awesome. I don't think there's a week where I don't download something from the free stuff. Usually free stuff means you're not going to get quality things, but Creative Market has some awesome fonts, particularly is usually what I download from free stuff. So, all right, we're going to give Ashley, I love where this is going with all the extra pieces, using some photography in here. This is great. Let's switch it up. Matthew, let's see where you're going with your Forward Together graphic.
Okay, give me 1 second.
Sweet. Those of you who are watching, feel free to throw your questions down in the comments thread. I'll throw them out to our designers or answer them as I can, and we'll be happy to answer any and all your questions today while we're chatting.
Awesome. So yeah, the idea, kind of what I'm going for is I want Together to be central, kind of in this graphic, fun, centric, something that kind of pops out. I'm going to bring a lot of different elements into this, and I'm going to use different kind of type techniques. For Forward, I kind of want to make it big in the background and give it motion. So I'm thinking something, I have this plugin it's called Black Market, and it uses what's called Displacement Maps. Basically what it does is you can take anything from textures to fonts, and you use basically a graphic to displace the different pixels within anything you're working off of. So in this case, it will be the type that I'm doing it on.
Okay.
And so if you scroll through here, you can see the different kind of images. And
are those ones that come from Black? I've never seen this tool, Matthew. So
yeah. So some come default through Black Market, but you can go to Unsplash right here, and you can search them, and they'll make them into a displacement map for you. So it's just a quicker way to, and you can do it on your own, but this is just a quicker way to have the plugin in Photoshop to make it faster.
Well, sweet. I
And then
think
you can change,
we've all learned something new already from you. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
yeah. But it's cool because here you can change like the power of the displacement map.
Yeah.
So like if I have this at 30 and I click this one called malfunction, see how it moves the text a little bit.
Love it.
If you go crazy and you want to make kind of a texture out of it, you're at 430. Then it just gets nuts, and now they're all over the place.
Oh, that's cool. I love it.
So it's really cool, like trial and error. I love working with it, especially on certain graphics. But for this one, I wanted to get somewhere it just kind of looked like forward had a little bit of motion, but also a little bit of chaos, because you're doing forward together. You're coming out of that chaotic moment. So it's trying to bring in a couple different themes here.
Sweet.
Work that all
I love
out.
it when you guys think of ways to incorporate not just a cool design, but purpose behind that cool design.
Yeah.
We're going to make motion out of this word because it is a chaotic time that we're trying to come out of in the church world. I have a question from Harvey here. I think this is more for me. Harvey's asking, what do you guys use for live streaming right now? You know what, Harvey? I went super simple. We used to use Zoom to live stream into Facebook groups. But I've actually found that this Facebook live video rooms, those Facebook rooms that you see in Messenger, you can live stream right into Facebook groups with that, or even onto your own timeline. This has actually worked better than any other tool I've used so far. There's some limitations to what you can do in it, but this has been a great tool for us to use, just live streaming these particular design hours. The unfortunate thing here is we don't actually get to see Matthew or Ashley while they're sharing their screens. You just get to look at my face moving around a bunch. So that's a downer, but that's okay. That's good with me. Matthew, there's a question here from Whit. He's asking if the plugin you're using is destructive or if it's turning things into smart objects or vectors.
Yeah, that's a great question. This one's actually not. The reason being is can you see my screen right here in the layers panel?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so before I used the plugin, I converted this to a smart object, the text layer. Now when the plugin is used, it comes in as a smart filter down here. So if I hide together on top, if I hide the smart filter, it's back to normal. I can convert this back to layers and it'll be a regular text again. So you don't have to do any rasterizing. It's all smart objects. You can edit.
Love it.
I can continue adding different displacement maps and taking off the ones that I don't need, but not destructive, which is nice.
Awesome. Yeah, one of our goals for all of us here at the squad is to not be destructive. What we mean by destructive is you could rasterize that text font layer that Matthew made and then add the displacement layer on top of it, and then you would never be able to edit that text ever again. But because he used a smart object first and turned that text in that smart object and then place the displacement map on top, he could go down into that smart object, change the text, come back over, and the displacement map would still be put on top of that. All right, another question for you, Matthew, and then after you answer that, we'll switch back over and see what Ashley's up to. The question is from Marcy asking, what font are you using for the word together?
It's one of my favorite ones. It's a secret. No, the font is, it's called Olive Village. The reason I love it, you can find it on Creative Market. I think it's like $15 on there. But I'll just show you the behind the scenes here, all the the glyphs they have with them. So this G is not the normal G that's used. It's a glyph that comes with it down here. The Y glyphs are awesome down here, but every lowercase and every uppercase either has one or two different alternatives, glyphs, letters that you can use within it. So Olive Village.
Those are the most versatile fonts for these kind of text-focused graphics, is to have something where you can change out that glyph or the letter to a different style, just so you can have, particularly on the way you've done together here, where the H has the, I'm spacing on the word, the extra tittle on the top.
Oh, the swash.
Right. The swash, yeah, sure. The swash to the right for the H and the swash to the left for the G kind of balances that overall graphic. Awesome. We're going to let Matthew kind of focus here for a little bit on what he's working on, not talk, and we'll switch back over. Ashley, show us what you've been up to while we last were watching you.
Sure. So I've got these images in here. I'm going for kind of a messier, ripped, torn collage kind of a look. This series is called Such is Life, Study on Relationships. And that seems like a silly thing to do clean to me, because relationships are not clean. So I kind of grabbed images here, hopefully to represent different stages of relationships: single, dating, married, raising children. I've got kind of this sand pouring in the corner here to represent blended families. So different imagery here. And then I've just got clipping masks going where I've got a torn brush effect that I'm just kind of going through, and let me make this smaller so you can see it, just painting away the clean edges to try and make it look like they've been.
So walk us through, because I know you have a couple that don't have those edges yet. So why don't you start from scratch on the mom and the kid one for us, and show us kind of the whole process of how you're doing that.
Definitely. So we've got this photo here. My first step is to create a mask on it, and you can find that over on the right here under the layers. It's this kind of rectangle with a circle in it. So I'll just click that and it creates a mask. You want to make sure that this mask is selected, and then anytime you use a brush, and I'll grab just a normal brush for now, make it a little smaller so you can see. Anytime you're painting with black on this masked layer, it paints away that part of the image. And going back to our conversation about non-destructive, if I were to switch this brush over to white, then it comes, oh, I gotta switch it though. It comes right back. So
you know what? That was I've always wondered that trick. I've always known how to add stuff to a mask, but I didn't know how to delete it. And I didn't realize it was a white and black thing. So thank you for teaching me something, Ashley.
Yeah, definitely. It's my favorite little trick. And a little handy shortcut is if you press X on your keyboard, it toggles between the two swatches on the left here, so you can go back and forth between black and white really fast.
Great.
So
well, that speeds up my masking on future projects. So
yeah. So then I just go through, and you can also change the angle of your mask. So kind of adjusting this circle here rotates the angle that this brush comes in. It's kind of large. Let me make it smaller. So it's at this kind of diagonal, and if I were to rotate it this way, now it's at a different diagonal. And so just knowing how I want to shape the image changes the way I want to adjust this.
Great.
I want this to be a little shorter. Oops.
I love this style you're going for. It's still simple while still having a little bit of bit more depth to it by adding these torn paper tears to it. So question, do you remember where you got these torn paper tear textures brushes from?
Yeah, so I knew that this question was going to be coming. I've had them for a while, but I'm pretty sure I got them from Brush Easy. I think that I originally just Googled torn paper Photoshop brush and tried to find one that you had permission to use.
Love it. We use a site that's by, I think, the same people that make Brush Easy, called Vect Easy. That's one we actually have a subscription to as a squad. Now we might have to get one for Brush Easy too. I didn't realize. Looking at it now, I know it's by the same people, but I'm writing a note to myself that we can go look and see if we can get you guys access to this as the whole squad. So.
Awesome.
Vect Easy's, like I said, that's by the same people here, and their whole thing is about vector-based things. You can find a bunch of different icons on there. It's a good starting place for someone like myself that doesn't know how to make stuff in Illustrator really easily. I can if I but it will take me hours to do something like that. Tools like Vect Easy save me time. All that. All right, Ashley, wait, hold up. What are you doing?
Sorry.
No, that's on me for talking while you're doing something cool.
So I'm going to just drop in a gradient map. I'm thinking I'd like these pictures to feel a little more unified since they had different photographers. So actually I just clicked on that too fast too. Oops. So in the bottom here, there's this little circle with a drop down, and towards the bottom of that menu, you've got a gradient map, which basically throws two colors over the top of anything underneath it. If you hold Option though, because I don't want it applied to everything, I just want it applied to my pictures, which I've got grouped together here. You just hold Option, and then this little rectangle with an arrow shows up. If you click it, it just applies it to the photos. I think I'm going to go a little simple off the bat. I know this one's a little crazy. I'm going to just start with black and white just to unify them off the top, and then go from there if I start to add color back in. So I'm going to do that. And then I like to add a little bit more. This font that I've chosen here feels very handwritten and scribbly. So if this was a messy, collage in front of us, there might be other scribbles on this page. So I'm going to change back to a normal brush, make it smaller so that it matches closer to the width of this type. Maybe this thinner one in the corner, that's a little thick. So just got my little shortcuts here to shorten it. And then I'll just scribble in some little textures here. Let's see, maybe we do one here. And
are you using your mouse to do those scribbles, or do you have a drawing tablet that you're using?
I wish I had a tablet. I'm using my mouse.
What you just did there, Ashley, is way cleaner than when I do drawing. But I think I know the trick here of how to clean it up. How are you making such clean draws with your mouse?
Yes, so I've got the smoothing tool on up at the top here. So if I were to bring this down to 0 and just start drawing, it just gets super fast and rough and ugly. But I crank it all the way up to 100%. What it basically does is it slows down the way the path tracks with your mouse. So it just makes it a little smoother. And if you run a little smoother, slower with your brush, then it just gives you a smoother path. Is that the way you do it?
Yeah, that's how I do it. That's the only way I could do it, because I'm a terrible drawer myself. So even if I had a drawing pad, it would still look like junk. So
I'm gonna be honest. I stopped designing to listen to how this is done, because I didn't know that trick.
Oh, you did it? All right.
I literally stopped designing. I was like, I have to see this.
You guys watching? One of the things that I was telling to Matthew and Ashley before we went live was one of the best things for even our squad is doing these live design things. We work remotely across the country, so we're not in a room together. And this is an awesome way for us to even learn from each other things we never knew was possible before. So this is great. Love learning new things while watching this. Sweet. All right, we're going to switch over. Speaking to Matthew, we haven't seen you in a bit. Let's see what your forward together graphics looking like for now. We'll let Ashley think a little bit on where she's at. And don't forget, you're welcome to ask questions at any time. If you want us to slow down and show you what we did, we're happy to show you what we're doing. Answer random questions about Church Media Squad as well, or the designers of things that are going on. Oh my goodness, Matthew, this is great. Tell us what you did here with your and together.
Yeah, so I guess since last time we were working on the forward, the displacement. So I put that big in the background just to create some motion, but kind of subtle in the background. Forward kind of gets lost, obviously, so I wanted to put it up top as well.
Great.
Give it a sense of movement, so I italicized it, repeated it a couple times, and then for this one, I just used a text box and justified the type, so I didn't have to like place those words. It does it for you. If you don't know about justified text, but it's a really cool way to do that.
Why don't you walk us through that, Matthew? Show us how you got that justified text going on there. By the way, your squad lead, Josh, says this is beautiful to you.
Thanks, Josh.
We have at Church Media Squad, we call them micro squads. They're basically smaller teams of designers, and then they each have squad leads or managers for them. Josh is Matthew's squad lead. We like to keep everything squad language. It's just fun that way. We don't like to use the traditional words, and not because they're bad, but we just find it's more fun doing it this way. So
yeah.
All right, go ahead, Matthew. I interrupted your thought on the text box there.
Sweet. Also appreciate my hype man, Josh. Thank you. But basically, I don't use text boxes normally just because I don't like working with them unless I'm doing like justified text or paragraphs. But for this, all you do, you click the type tool up here, and then you click and hold down and drag, and this will start making a box. So you can make it whatever you want. If you want to constrain the proportions, press Shift, turn into a box. For me, I wanted to get it to the front of the F in the background, to the end of the D and forward. So it was all kind of aligned there. Once you let go, it's going to autofill basically your last type and scale that you had. So I'm going to edit it from here, and I'll type forward 3 times. If you were doing it normally, like it was left aligned like this is what it would look like. And then what you do is come over to paragraphed. You don't have it, you can get it from Windows, click paragraph, it'll pop up. And this last one, this complete like rectangle, will justify it. And so from there, I basically just edit it. If I make it smaller, the scale, you see it still stays justified and aligned. That's kind of how you do it.
Great. Yeah, I am the same way. I avoid using text boxes like the plague in Photoshop.
Yes, exactly.
Just mostly, and the reason there is they don't align as well. Because when Photoshop's trying to align a text box, it's aligning based off of the box and not necessarily where the text is in the box.
Right.
Versus if you're just doing a text layer that's not in a box, it's way easier to align stuff using just flat text. There's still a little bit of give sometimes depending on the font you're using. So, but in this case, the text box is super helpful. The text boxes are way more helpful in InDesign, I think, where you're trying to deal with big things like you said, Matthew, like paragraphs, things that have a lot of type and text in them. You want to be able to justify a bunch of text. This was a cool way. I hadn't thought about using it to justify it to a width there like that before. Cool. All right, so next up, next question, your smiley face right here. Tell us what you're doing and why you're doing it, and then after that, tell us where you got the smiley face from.
Okay, so yeah, I include a smiley face. For me, it adds a little more fun to it. I have different kind of smiley faces through a pack that I got from, I believe, on Instagram, it's George Solaris. I'm not sure, but he basically has this whole elements pack that I got from there.
Did you get that from him directly, or
yeah?
This looks like this was part of New Supply at one point.
Oh, see, they do put out his stuff too, so I could have got it from them as well. New Supply, I love them, subscribe to them too, but I think I got this maybe from him directly. I've got a couple from him directly. So yeah, basically using this smiley, and what I'm gonna do is with the subtle background is mask the smiley into it, so it's not just laying on top. For this, basically what I did was, if you hold Command on your keyboard and click a layer, it'll bring up, it'll select it, and then I can mask from there using the black and white like Ashley did. So I'm just gonna mask away different parts of the smiley to kind of look like it's going through the type and the different elements that were made from the displacement map.
And I love doing stuff. I do that kind of thing all the time now too, because it gives your graphic a bit more depth to it. It's not just flat things on top of flat things, but it'll actually make like the smiley faces interweaving between the letters of forward there, which makes it just way cooler looking generally.
And then also
puts together into play too. You're interweaving elements of the design to play on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I normally like to add, I learned this from New Supply. They released way back in the day, probably a year ago, a whole pack of color lookups. If I take off the color lookups and the texture on this right now, it looks very, just doesn't look as interesting. It's not as fun. It's kind of very basic. You're like, what's going on there? It's not bad, but it's not cohesive. It doesn't bring, nothing's like kind of brought together. So I'll add.
Can you show us where you get, or where to use a color lookup in Photoshop real quick, Matthew?
Yeah, so I'll actually just start from here. So if you come down here on your layers panel, you can see you can add a solid color gradient pattern, all that fun stuff, all the different adjustment layers. One of them is called color lookup here. So if I click that, brings up this layer here, and up top, you'll have default color lookups already just in here as presets. I have ones from Joe from New Supply, so I use his boost a lot. Awesome. What color lookup does, you can't really see it on this too much. You would definitely be able to see it on Ashley's. it brings a lot of tones together. So if you're doing like a collage and different images and different assets, like it'll start to level those out and bring it all together so it looks cohesive versus the different highlights and shadows and tones and saturations will kind of mesh it all together. And that's why I love to use them.
Yeah. That's why, that's when I use the color lookups too, is I'm using multiple different photos from Unsplash, for instance.
Yeah.
And they're all using different lighting. The color lookup tends to make it all look cohesive and similar. It's great.
Then there's some crazy ones. Like if I click this tension green, you can just see how it like changes the look of everything. But it's really kind of figuring out what works for that style and the graphic that you're going for.
Yep.
So
awesome.
That's that. Yep.
Cool. All right, we're gonna switch over to Ashley. I can see that she's doing some cool stuff on her graphic. Matthew will let you kind of keep thinking on what you're doing there. Thanks for answering my questions.
Yeah.
Ashley, let's come on over to you. Looks like you've added some color. How dare you?
I have. Yeah, so I've added some color, which P.S. Matthew, you and I should talk about the color lookup thing later because I'm learning something new as well. But yeah, so I've made my scribbles and the scribbly text blue, added some blue in here. And then I've actually added a lot on the top. I'll hide all these. So this is maybe roughly where we last left off, give or take a few little scribbles. But so I've gone ahead and let me bring this transparency up. Started adding some textures. So these are just some images that I've pulled that I love the textures, and I really just like playing with blending modes. It's my comfort zone in Photoshop. Adjusting how intense I want it to be. Some of these
we went over that last week where most designers, all we really do are playing around with different settings in Photoshop all the time for the look we want.
So I've got this like glued paper coming in. One of the things I did and see if I could track it down, is this type down here where it says a series on relationships. If I zoom in here, I've gone ahead and masked the type as well with, I've got a water brush mask that water brush that I've come in. So I'll delete this and kind of redo it so you can see, just so it's not actually got even multiplied and opacity down. If I bring it all the way up, it's still just a little too clean for how messy everything else is trying to be. And I find that watercolor brushes already, they're not stark. It's not going to just eliminate the item in front of me. It just kind of brings it in really slowly. So if I just paint that in, you can see it's super subtle. It just starts to add a little bit of texture to the font that's there. So I've got that going and multiplying it and bringing the opacity down till it matches everything else.
That's a cool little detail aspect, Ashley. I love it.
Thank you. I also love doing stuff like this. So I'm going to bring in this image that just has nothing to do with the artwork in front of me. And I like playing with blending modes on stuff like this. I find that it gives a lot of cool, I like the way that looks.
Yep. That's a trick. I think everyone on the squad would recognize that as a Michael trick for sure, because that's a default thing of it doesn't have enough depth. Let's add a light filter on top of it and put it on lightener screen and then put it like 15 or 20% or something like that.
Yeah, well, and then even this one, so this one's got a lot of red and yellows, which is not the colors I'm trying to introduce here.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna just apply a hue and saturation filter to it. And if you just take this color bar and just kind of slide it around, the colors will start to shift around.
Yeah.
And start to get into the family of where I'm playing at. I think I like that one maybe.
Sweet.
And then actually, like this guy is starting to lose himself. Oops, wait.
Love it. There we go. Yeah, it's still important to be able to read the title at the end of the
Absolutely. Rule number one.
Rule number one, make sure it's legible. One of the things I said last week, and I'll say again because it's so important when it comes to design, there's a difference between design and art. Art is simply making something beautiful or cool or great looking. It usually comes from the creator's heart, something that's feelings driven. When we're designing, though, it's a different ballgame. Design is trying to solve a problem, ultimately. In the case of digital or print graphics, like what we do at Church Media Squad all day, every day, it's solving the problem of communication. How do we communicate or get the message across that this is a sermon series about relationships, for instance? So when we're designing, and like what we've heard from Ashley on hers or Matthew's, there's purpose behind every aspect of the design. Maybe not every aspect, but a lot of aspects of the design have a reason behind what they're doing. So in this case, the one we have in front of us from Ashley, it was brilliant to put in the rough tear marks on the photos because life is not a clean cut thing, but it's usually messy. The graphic overall is messy. It's a great thing. So anyways, cool stuff. Love design mentality of we're basically solving a communications problem there, and also why it's important to make sure your text is legible too at the end. Cool. Awesome. What are you putting in now, Ashley?
So these, see if I can bring it up a little clearer. I found this pack. There's a blog that I've been tracking for a long time. It's called Blog Spoon Graphics. It's the most obscure name. But he has a lot of free packs of a lot of things. So a lot of the textures I'm using right now are from him. And these pieces of tape that he's scanned in are from him as well. So he's got a lot of like plastic textures, tape. I think I've got one, yep, right here that might be a little easier to see than the clear piece of tape. This one is like a piece of packing tape. So they're just textures that get brought in. So I brought in the clear pieces of tape. You can see one that I've turned blue up here and one over on the right as well. So I've just brought in a few of those pieces. They come in as PNGs, which is great because they lay really beautifully over what's already there.
And it actually looks like tape then too. It's not because clear tape has got transparency to it, but most of the tape textures I've seen don't have that as part of it. It's more of it is a PNG in that there's no white around the actual tape, but the tape isn't see-through at all. So that's a helpful resource there.
Yeah, I've been a big fan of these ones. In a lot of designs, the clear looks beautiful. I think in this one, it's getting a little lost. So I've just added a little bit of color to them and turned it more into a texture than trying to mimic a piece of tape at this point. But that's what we're doing.
Awesome. All right, let's switch it up. Let's go look at Matthew here and see what Matthew's up to.
All right.
And Matthew's doing what's typical for Matthew and throwing in a good Bible verse into his graphics.
Is my screen shared right now?
What's that?
Is it shared? Can you see my screen right now?
Yeah, I can see your screen.
Yes, this is a typical move. I'm just building out an asset right now that'll actually, I'm going to turn it and it's going to go in the corner, but it's just more, this is more of a secondary piece. It's not supposed to be the main where, you know, it's a little detail, a little Easter egg, I guess, if you're looking through. But this is just a verse from Romans that works together with the title, again, having some kind of purpose in it. Normally,
I love that style from you, Matthew. I think that's one of the coolest things about it. Every designer on staff has like their tell, basically. That's what who designed it. This is Matthew, so I think it's a good thing that adds to the design with purpose still too. You picked a verse that's not just out of thin air.
Right.
It actually makes sense for this particular series, but it's also, like I said, it's not part of the actual design. It's just extra Easter egg. That's a good way of putting it.
Right. Yeah, and sometimes in sermon series, in the descriptions, like clients they'll give us our description and they'll say what verses this is coming from. So it's nice to have those, be able to include them in little small ways to where it's not taking over the graphic, but just kind of ties everything in together a little bit more.
Sweet. Looking good. So Matthew, a color related question for you from me. Why yellow? Why are you using yellow for your accent color?
I'm going to be honest. This is like, so I've been doing, this is kind of, I would say if you look at this, it's kind of more geared towards youth. And a lot of like when I'm looking around at styles and different things that people are doing right now, there's a big push right now with the yellow and black and the white and a lot of like youth graphics. I think the reason it could be another color, doesn't have to be yellow, but I like the idea of having little pops to where it's not super overwhelming, but it catches your eye and it balances it in different ways and in different parts of the graphic. So you have like the yellow up here, in the middle, down to the right, a little bit over to the left. So it's just trying to create that contrast. Whatever color I ultimately land on, because what I like to do too is what Ashley was talking about is gradient mapping this in the end, if you wanted to find like different styles. And I have a solid amount of gradient maps from Black Market is a resource, and then the thermal camera is actually also from George. So you can kind of click around and look at these different maps and see, you know, what color scheme. I normally offer 3 to 4 different variations of colors to like clients, just to see if there's anything that they want to land on, something that speaks, they know their congregation better. So I'll work around these different things. A lot of them don't work, but when you land on something that does, you can kind of mess with it and kind of bring it home in a different way than you previously had it, if that makes sense.
Cool. Awesome. That's a different way of approaching the recolorizing than what I would normally do is just add a hue layer on top and then just mess with that to kind of figure out if there's a different color scheme I hadn't thought of.
Yeah.
I love the gradient map idea.
Yeah, sometimes it works. Sometimes you're just like, I'm not really getting what I want. And that's fine, but it's always fun playing with these because you can really quickly get a whole different colorway that you would have never seen before. Yeah,
that's great. That's cool.
Yeah.
And you said you got these from you already mentioned the sites you got these from. We already have them in the list there. So cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Sweet. All right. Well, how are you guys feeling on these designs? You feel, I don't want to make you beat them to death at all just because we have a whole hour that we had set aside for this. So if you feel good, we're good with it. Or Matthew, I see you're about to pull in something also atypical or typical for you as well.
Let's pull in rips. More rips.
More rips.
I'm pretty much done here though, once this extra asset is done.
Awesome. Do you remember where you got your torn paper rips from?
I think these were Envato elements, the one that we have a subscription to. Yeah, I'm pretty sure those are Envato.
We love Envato Elements. It's, again, another subscription site. They have a crazy amount of assets. Some of them are really great. Some of them are not so great. It's not the easiest site to search through, unfortunately. Although I will say, I think I haven't yet found a creative asset website that has great search functionality. If I'm searching for something, I almost hardly can find it right away. Elements is a great starting point for sure. Lots of resources for just a monthly subscription. So yeah. We also use New Supply. That's from our friends Jonathan Mullum and Joe Cavazos. They're stellar guys. They also run Sunday Social, where you guys see their stuff all the time in this Facebook group on church comms. They're great guys. They have stellar eyes for quality design assets. New Supply, it's a good option to just get really cool, awesome assets like textures and sometimes fonts or other filters and things you can put on top. So it's a good aspect. Oh, Matthew, show us how you're getting this awesome kind of texture on top of together.
Yeah, so this is another thing to kind of tie things together, all the different elements, but this is, I don't know where this one is from. This might be New Supply too, but I have a whole folder of just different torn paper and textures. This is a black.
The black one is from Elements too.
Elements, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and then we got one from Michelle. She made little paper rips too, so we got the squad exclusives in here too. But once you bring in a texture like this is a paper texture. I'll show you what it looks like normally if I put it above all my filters. So it looks like this. I want it to look like it's going through all the different elements, so these whites and stuff will go through them. The way you do that is Ashley was talking about, and so is Michael, like the different blend modes. They're your friends. So if you go to exclusion, it actually puts it through all the different elements. I don't know how it works, but it works. And I normally throw them under my color lookup, so see how it's kind of like washed out at the top right now? I don't love that. The blacks aren't as black as I want them to be. So if I throw it under the color lookup, it kind of blends it all in there, and then you still get these little fun details within the type and within the other elements.
I feel like almost every designer, if not all of us at Church Media Squad, if you were to ask us what each blend mode does, the answer would probably be blank stare. Like, I don't know exactly what it does, but I know the kind. But at the same time, you play with them enough, you know roughly what the texture is going to do when you select that adjustment. So
that's what's funny is like you can't really explain it, but you know what the look's going to be because you've done it so many times that you know how it's going to react within the graphic.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Well, Matthew, I love where yours landed. This is great. Good job. Ashley, let's kind of see where you've landed. Do you feel like you've landed yet? Do you feel like you got a couple more things you're going to add?
Yeah, I think I'm taking a valuable lesson in knowing when to stop, which is also
It's hard for me. It's hard for me, so I need to learn from you.
So I think I'm going to let it rest in its intentional busyness.
Awesome. Great. I think that's one of the key things as designers too that we have to remember is when do you stop adding stuff to a graphic? And it's one of those things you kind of have to play around with. It's going to take some time getting used to when to stop. I'll fully admit that earlier on in my design journey, I tried to add all the textures and all the things. And sometimes even Ashley, like in your graphics case, if we took out all the texture you had, it would still be a great graphic. So it's one of those things that you can add stuff if it's got a purpose, but don't keep adding things if you don't have a reason behind adding all those textures. So awesome. Well, we're done a little bit earlier than our full hour, and I think that's totally okay. I want to thank you guys. If you want to stop sharing your screens for a minute, we can kind of say goodbye to everyone and wave our hands. And I want to thank you, Ashley and Matthew, for joining me today, sharing your design skills and talent with the Church Comms group with me. Guys, if you sign up for Church Media Squad, we have a 14-day free trial. You get free unlimited custom graphics for those 14 days. It's a good chance to test us out, see if we're a good fit for the design needs for your church. And you'll get graphics designed by maybe not Matthew or Ashley, maybe Matthew and Ashley, who knows, as you join us. But we have awesome designers. We have 17 full-time designers on staff. We're looking to add another one right now. We're in the process of, we're growing constantly. Lots of quality designers. I might be biased, but I think Church Media Squad has the best designers in the space, and I'm not one of them. I'm not one of those best designers in the church space, but we've got before me two of the best ones out there. So thank you guys. Thank you, Church Comms Group, for letting us do this. We're going to work hard to get these graphics ready for download for you guys by tomorrow at the latest. I promise this time. And we'll have another one of these. They have one more this month that we're going to do next week with a couple more of our designers. So keep in mind some of your design needs for next week. The ones we did today came from Church Comms people. We actually designed graphics that were asked by them, which is awesome. I can't wait for them to have their hands on that. We'd love to do that again for you next week. So thank you guys. Hope you have a good rest of your Thursday, good weekend. If you haven't checked out the espresso machine giveaway, go on over into the announcements channel on the Church Comms group and find a way to enter. Thanks all. We'll see you around.
Bye.